introduction to credit cards, and it is important. But before anything leaves, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You know them as the plastic cards that almost everyone carries in their wallets. Credit cards are accounts that let you borrow money from the credit card issuer and pay it back over time. For every month when you don't pay back the money in full, you'll be charged interest on your remaining balance. Note that some credit cards, called charge cards, require you to pay your balance in full each month. However, these are less common. What's the difference between credit and debit cards? Here's the difference. Debit cards take money directly out of your checking account. You can't borrow money with debit cards, which means that you can't spend more cash than you have in the bank. And debit cards don't help you build up a credit history and credit rating. Credit cards allow you to borrow money and do not pull cash from your bank account. This can be helpful for large, unexpected purchases, but carrying a balance, not paying back in full the money that you borrowed every month means that you owe interest to the credit card issuer. In fact, by late 2021, Americans owed $800 billion in credit card debt. So be very careful about spending more money than you have, because debt can build up quickly and snowball over time. On the other hand, using a credit card judiciously and paying your credit card bills on time helps you establish a credit history and a good credit rating. It's important to build a good credit rating, not only to qualify for the best credit cards, but also because you will get more favorable interest rates on car loans, personal loans, and mortgages. What is APR? APR stands for annual percentage rate. This is the amount of interest that you owe the credit card issuer on any unpaid balance. You'll want to pay close attention to this number when you apply for a credit card. A higher number can cost you hundreds or even thousands of dollars if you carry a large balance over time. The average APR today is about 20%, but your rate may be higher if you have bad credit. Interest rates also tend to vary by the type of credit card. Which credit card should I choose? Credit scores have a big impact on your odds of getting approved for a credit card. Understanding what range your score falls into can help you narrow the options as you decide on the cards for which you may apply. Beyond your credit score, you'll also need to decide which perks best suit your lifestyle and spending habits. If you've never had a credit card before, or if you have bad credit, you likely need to apply for either a secured credit card or a subprime credit card. By using one of these and paying back on time, you can raise your credit score and earn the right to credit at better rates. If you have fair to good credit, you can choose from a variety of credit card types, such as travel rewards cards. These credit cards offer points redeemable for travel, including for flights, hotels, and rental cars with each dollar you spend. Cashback cards. If you don't travel often or don't want to deal with converting points into real-life perks, a cashback card might be the best fit for you. Every month, you receive a small portion of your spending back in cash or as a credit to your statement. Balance transfer cards. If you have balances on other cards with high interest rates, transferring your balance to a lower rate credit card could save you money and help your credit score. Low or no APR cards. If you're a team to carry a balance from month to month, switching to a credit card with a low or no APR could save you hundreds of dollars per year in interest payments. Be aware of your protections under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Research credit opportunities and available interest rates, and be sure that you are offered the best rates for your particular credit history and financial situation. How to create a budget. Creating a budget is one of the simplest and most effective ways to control your spending, saving, and investing. You can begin to improve your financial health if you don't know where your money is going, so start tracking your expenses against your income, then set clear goals. How do I create a budget? Budgeting starts with tracking how much money you receive every month, minus how much money you spend every month. You can do this in an Excel sheet, on paper, or in a budgeting app. It's up to you. However you track your budget, clearly lay out the following. Income. List all sources of money that you receive in a month with a dollar amount. This can include paychecks, investment income, alimony, settlements, and money that you make from side jobs or other projects, such as selling crafts. Expenses. List every purchase that you make in a month, split into two categories: fixed expenses and discretionary spending. If you can't remember where you're spending money, review your bank statements, credit card statements, and brokerage account statements. Fixed expenses are the purchases that you must make every month. Their amounts don't change, or change very little, and are considered essential. They include rent, mortgage payments, loan payments, and utilities. Discretionary spending is the category for non-essential, or varying purchases for things like restaurant meals, shopping, clothes, and travel. Consider them wants rather than needs. Savings. Record the amount of money that you're able to save each month, whether it's in cash deposited into a bank account, or money that you add to an investment account or retirement account like an IRA or 401k, if your employer offers one. Now that you have a clear picture of money coming in, money going out, and money saved, you can identify which expenses you can cut back on if necessary. Subtract your expenses from your total income to get the amount of money you have left at the end of the month. If you don't already have one, put your extra money into an emergency fund until you've saved 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in case of a job loss or other emergency. Don't use this money for discretionary spending. The key is to keep it safe and grow it for times when your income decreases or stops.